Hello garden people! We're back out at the garden. I'm here with my friend Michael, and it's been quite a while. I was just going through my phone looking at the photos and the videos that I've posted, and it looks like I haven't posted since May or early April. So as you can tell, the garden's growing a lot. July is always a time where things are really coming into their own. But I wanted to backtrack just a little bit and talk about a lot of the successes of the season. So it was a great year for honeyberries. Got a lot of all my different vines off of. So why don't we start looking at how big the honeyberry vines have gotten this year. They're all done for the season because they're pretty early. But I think it's Tundra, Berry Blue, and Yeastberry Solo are the three biggest ones I have. These are all patented varieties. I believe the Tundra and the Berry Blue were some of the first accessions from the University of Saskatchewan, and I think the Yeastberry Solo is from, I forget the professor's name, but from the West Coast, the Oregon or Washington. But you can see they're getting absolutely huge. This one has, the Tundra has a much more upright growth habit, versus the Berry Blue over there is much more sprawling, kind of a bush type habit. And it probably made at least a couple pounds of berries this year, which is really fun. And you can see it's a very northern plant, so these ones have a lot of Russian genetics, and so they're actually on their way. The leaves are senescing earlier than, say, if we compare it to a plum or a peach tree. The peach tree is a much more southern plant, so it's still growing full tilt. And in nature, there's sort of a trade-off, you know. So the peach will grow longer, but it. Was it pause?
No, that was my phone, sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. The peach will grow longer, but it might not get all of the nutrients back into its system before it frosts and all the leaves fall off. So it's kind of a trade-off. The Russian one is used to a very cold environment where winter comes really quickly, and so it will get all of the iron and other parts of the chlorophyll molecules and the nickel and all the trace elements back into its stem and into its roots before winter, whereas the peach tree may or may not, depending on the season we get. But great season for the honeyberries. So that was the first thing. Honeyberries went great, and then after that we had our strawberry crop, and the strawberries were also really good. Overall, I harvested more than I can eat, which took a couple years to get to that point where you're not just eating them in the garden, you're taking some home. I do have one weird one this year that I think I've seen in years past. I'm not sure if it's a wild one I planted or where it came from, but the berries were much more spongy and much smaller with kind of a weird taste. So I did end up pulling out most of those as far as I could, because the problem is these sort of subpar strawberry also spread the quickest. So over time, eventually all of my strawberries would be that one. And I really want to encourage the other strawberries I have that are larger and a little bit tastier. So there's still a couple of those here and there, but I tried to reduce the population of that to get back up the population of the ones I was really going for. So with the strawberry crop was great. We also had a ton of lettuces, so a ton of spinach, lettuces of various kinds, arugula, and then all the brassicas, like the kales of various sorts, and then the cabbages. Let's go look at the cabbages now, because they're starting to come into their own. After I pulled out a lot of the spinach and arugula and things like that, I went and did a second planting. So I used some transplants, and you can see I filled in with my weeds, tried to cover the ground a bit. So there's kind of a good layer of leaf matter to help keep the ground soft, and you can look down there, it's really nice. So these are cabbages, they're growing great. Now we do have cabbage white moths here. So if we look for any amount of time, we'll see these little green caterpillars. You know, I don't worry about it. I mean, I always tell people, this is how you can tell there's no poison. So that's pretty convincing. That's one of the things I've been working on this year. I mean, I haven't used poison in the past either, but I think more explicitly in trying to establish that I just don't use poison. So I think that's it seems like a trite thing to say, because like, yeah, no one uses poisons, but you'd be surprised how many solutions people, their first impulse is like, oh, I'll just get a poison and put it on it. And I think we should all kind of question ourselves and like, hey, maybe we shouldn't use poison as our first strategy, or maybe a strategy. Maybe we should take it out of the toolbox and see what else we can come up with that will solve the problem. But there's a trade-off. I mean, that's why I have holes in the leaves. That said, the kales are all looking great. So if you look over here, I mean, sure, there's some cabbage white damage. And, you know, I always make sure to wash it carefully when I take it in the garden, not for poison, just because there are these little gross caterpillars. But, you know, overall, the plant's fine. Like, it's growing great. And then by late season, when kale's really the best is when it starts to get cold again. It's fine in the summer, but when it gets cold, it's better. The cabbage whites go away. So then the foliage is beautiful again. And you could solve this type of damage by putting netting over the plants. That's something I might consider in the future, but I haven't really played with yet. But let's look around a bit. The one exciting thing in the last couple days is the bergamot is flowering. And I'll show a little video of outside the garden where there's a bigger patch of this, and the bees are just going crazy over it. Also, we have sunflowers. I don't know, Michael, if you can see the one in the corn cage, but that one's going. Let's go check out the corn cage. So this monstrosity is, let me backtrack one level. I like the idea of emergence, so I didn't get everything for this corn cage this year. If you recall from last year, I built the little screened house to keep out mosquitoes, where I could go in and read a book, or more accurately, play around on my phone. You know, and that was fine, but it was kind of boring just to hang out in the hang out in a netting cage. So I took those posts and built a frame to grow corn, because corn grows well here, but the raccoons come and eat it every time. And so I was like, well, if I make an entire cage that I net from into the ground through the roof, presumably the raccoons can't get in, is the idea. We'll see if that's true, but that was the idea. And so the corn got put in, and then you want a function stack. And so there's not just corn in here. Previously, you have to kind of hold that. Previously there were peas in here. You can still see some of the stubble that I threw on the ground. Harvested those, but then on the sides we also have Appios americana, groundnut. So that continues here, and then all the way around the back side, you can see one way up here. That's an Appios americana. So that's called groundnut. It's a biennial tuber that's native to North America. In addition to that, we have a few tomatoes, like you can see one up front, but there's several tomatoes out throughout the rest of this. If you look down on the ground, there's corn and squash. I don't know if you can even see it, but kind of a mess. But there's beans and corn and squash plants. I don't know if there's enough light that's going to actually make much of a crop, but I wanted to kind of cover the ground to ignore some of the weeds. And then on the far side, there's another vining crop that's my Chinese yam. So this is a Chinese yam. There's a few of them there. So that one's kind of interesting. Probably somewhat of a controversial choice. Totally legal in Iowa, but it does have some invasive potential because it makes aerial tubers. And so not only is there a tuber in the ground, there's also tubers in the stem. So if it theoretically falls over, it can plant itself, which is vegetative propagation in general is a very useful strategy for invasion for plants. I mean, that said, in a weird year, in a weird time, I do think we can do worse than tuberous crops that provide calories that are so vigorous that we might actually have to fight them a little bit, especially in Iowa, where we're not next to some really pristine forest. I'd say one of the major ground species here is garlic mustard. The other ones are burdock and maybe curly dock. So there's actually, it's not a particularly high quality forest. I enjoy it a lot, and I'm quite saddened that you can hear the noise of them destroying a portion of it over there. That said, you know, a little bit of tuberous crops joining the novel ecosystem that is this forest would probably be beneficial, at least in my opinion. But a little bit controversial choice. I think it's a cool crop. I'm curious to see how it goes. And so far, it's definitely contained in this corn cage. One fun thing, I don't know if I ever made a video on this, but this spring I was thinking about different things that I would see in the garden that would denote that it's improving, that it's hitting higher levels of ecological success. And one of them was finding a bird in a tree. And so if you kind of zoom in, you can see a robin, and oh, you can even see the baby today. If you get up in there. So this has been really fun to see. This robin just nesting in the tree, and she's quite calm. I'm assuming it's a she. I think the females are the better parents than birds, but I guess it could be a guy. That said, the parent is quite calm because I walk around enough that it doesn't really seem to be bothered by my presence. Or if it does, it likes the tree well enough that it's going to put up with it. So that's exciting to see. There's obviously other birds around in birdhouses, but this is the first one I've found in a tree that just built a nest. So it's pretty exciting to see. Now, one challenge or feedback or a not total success this year was this plum tree actually did have some fruits on it. But as far as I can tell, they were all dropped by the tree. And I think it was because they had Plum Curculio. I looked at the fallen fruits and every one of them had the hallmark signs. I even opened one up and saw the grub. So we officially have Plum Curculio, which is one of the biggest challenges for at least plums, but I think also some other stone fruits. I haven't seen any in the peach tree, although technically I think that they can be the host for that. So this isn't, I think almost all organic growers face this at some point in temperate climates. In theory, so there's different things you can do. What I might do next year is get some kaolin clay. It's very fine particle clay, and you can mist it onto the fruits, and that will give a coat which is just irritating to the bugs, and theoretically they won't oviposit into the fruit. I think that'll work. There's disadvantages. Obviously it's labor intensive to do that. With one tree, it's probably not a big deal, but you also have to buy the clay and then buy some sort of sprayer. Even like a squirt bottle will probably work. And if it rains a lot, you have to keep reapplying it. So it's not ideal. The benefit is it doesn't just kill everything, right? Because if you saw the bees in this tree this spring, there was immense. And if you look around, there's still ants and wasps and various things that come in and use it. Right now we have a lot of Japanese beetles. So about 2 weeks ago, the Japanese beetles emerged, which is a big problem in this part of the country. You can see the leaves. This and the grapes, we'll show a couple examples. Actually, I bet if I'll try to get a whole shot of this. You can see a couple. Sometimes if you find a place where they're super active, and it's still pretty early in the morning, so they're a little bit lazier, but you'll shake something and there'll just be a swarm of them that goes up in the air. You know, for all the gardeners out there, don't despair. It doesn't really kill the plants, and as far as I can tell, I've never seen a plant die from Japanese beetles. It definitely skeletalizes them a lot, but you know, I think over time the biology will balance out, so the nematode species and the various other things that parasitize the Japanese beetles will come into this part of the country. I think they're already present in the eastern part of the United States, but they're not really present in Iowa yet, so we still get some pretty major booms. So that said, that's where a lot of the species on here right now are just Japanese beetles. But once again, I don't think poison's a good option. If you had it in orchard, or like some sort of food forest on your own land, I actually think livestock would be really helpful. Say a lot of chickens or some rotated goats, but something to clean up the fruit off of the ground so that it can't complete the life cycle. I think that's what a lot of people have success with. I've, in my mind, played with the idea of getting a couple chickens here, but I don't think it's practical, and I don't think the city would be particularly happy. So I think the clay might be a good solution, and or just really focusing on other crops that are doing well. Speaking of other crops that are doing well, let's go check out the peach tree, because it really is the star of this year. This would be, if I'm able to get the fruits to fruition, it will be the first year that any tree has put on a heavy fruit set. So you can see just on this branch, the sun is kind of showing it, it's just covered in peaches. And that's true throughout the tree. I think the southern part of the tree actually has the most peaches, but they're all throughout the canopy and whatnot. So just a beautiful, beautiful plant. Now, it's definitely still dropping a few peaches, because I never came in and thinned them out. My logic was the tree will know which ones to drop better than I will. And I'm also not particularly concerned if the fruits are a little bit smaller than they would be otherwise. So that's my logic. We'll see if that's a good strategy. People also do thin it out to every 6 inches. So if that's how you do it, cool. I am just kind of letting the tree do it, seeing this here. But yeah, it's going great. So I'm really excited to see this. You can see on this branch too, just totally laden with, I mean, you can see it, the branch is physically being held down by peaches. Now, because it has such good crotch angles, I'm not worried about the branch breaking. I do think I will have to remove that branch this winter just to, you know, give this cherry tree some more space and not be able to walk through easier. Which, that's the disadvantage of having so many trees in such a tight space, that it's a great branch, and if you had a bigger field, it'd be one that you would definitely want to keep because it looks like it's in good shape. It's the low-hanging fruit, literally. You can just walk up and pick it, versus, you know, some of the ones up there are going to be a little bit more challenging. So yeah, don't hate on the low-hanging fruit. That said, if you're planting in this kind of dense polyculture, it's okay to make sacrifices for walkability and enjoyability. So this winter I'll chop that off. A lot of other things are coming in. So here's the sprawling groundberry, or honeyberry. So it's more of a compact bush habit. And then here's some black-eyed Susans, or sorry, some gray-headed coneflowers that are coming in. And I've seen a lot of bees on these. So I like this. If you can start to see some of the elements of the polyculture, say with this pear tree. There's asparagus coming in, the bergamot with all the bees are coming up. There's comfrey and currants and some Jerusalem artichokes that I have kind of a love-hate relationship here. There's an extremely sad blueberry that actually put blueberries on, but they were awful. I don't know what was wrong with them. So, I mean, it's kind of dying, and I'm like, well, I'm not particularly heartbroken about it because it never did well. Cup plant. Okay, here's something that I actually haven't seen videos on, but I actually think works pretty well here. Helianthus something rather, cup plant. And there's some big examples I can show you over in the prairie bed, but I have it in with these trees, which is sort of a, if you're an active gardener, it's a great plant because you can come in, now usually I would use a knife or something, but you can cut it just like a comfrey. Okay, I pulled this up, but if you cut it, you won't get the roots. You can use it as a chop and drop. And there's also comfort here, acting in a similar way. The disadvantage of cup plant is it will get about 6 feet tall. The advantage is it grows really well. So I actually think in places where comfrey doesn't grow well, the cup plant might grow better. So if you're an actively managing gardener, might be a species to consider. Disadvantage is it's not seed sterile, so if you let it flower, it will spread, and you'll see some around various places. So it's an extremely vigorous plant, which is good and bad. Speaking of vigorous plants, I've got this horseradish here, which is an amazing plant. I've had it for a couple years, and until this year I never tried to harvest any of it. This is kind of a design failure on my part. It's not great to put a tuberous crop under a tree, because then to harvest it you have to kind of disturb the roots of the tree. So this year I did carefully pull up some of the tubers, or I don't know if they're technically tubers, but the roots are what you eat of the horseradish. Yeah, sorry, I'm pushing back. But there's 2 here, actually even a third over there, and I pulled a third out here. So I'm establishing some horseradish in spots where I can dig it. And next to this is potatoes, and I kind of keep the raspberries ebb and flow. Every couple of years I try to push them back and keep them in the same spot. One of the other things that I've done this year is get a ton of hazelnuts and chestnuts. Now, in this garden, that's kind of crazy. Hazelnuts, a little bit less so because it'll be a bush, and I've used the hazelnut wood for trellises, so it'd be good to use to grow the material that I'll need for trellising in the future. Because currently I'm getting that from the house I'm living at. The chestnuts are an amazing food crop, and even if I end up moving most of the ones I planted, so like this is a chestnut, there's actually one over there in the corner too, and this is a hazelnut. The chestnut will get kind of big. If I leave it and don't prune it at all, it'll get probably too large for this context. At least currently it's on kind of the shadier side of the garden, away from my neighbors, so it could get reasonably tall and still not shade out their plot. So that's one thing you have to be kind of cognizant of. And if you look around in the garden, in the summer I always let the trees grow, but I'll keep the ones that are further this direction a little bit taller than the ones that are along the fence, just to be considerate. So the chestnut's an amazing tree. I'm curious to see how it grows. I want to watch it. I want to observe when it flowers, how the branch pattern is, what kind of pests I see on it. If I end up having to take it out, that's okay. I got over 100 this year. So there's some at my parents' place, there's some at my girlfriend's family's place, kind of planting them all around, trying to, you know, get them established where I'll have spheres of influence in the future, and observe while I'm in this garden. So kind of an interesting species. I built this cold frame bed. What I was trying to do was propagate honeyberry seeds. So supposedly you can take it the first year and plant them. I haven't seen any honeyberry seeds actually sprout, and I put these peppers in just so they had extra peppers. I figured that if I put plants in, I'll be more apt to water it frequently, because I'll see, like, oh yes, I must water that. There are some seedlings coming up of something. I don't think these are honeyberries, because they're kind of mildly serrated, and honeyberries aren't serrated. But it's an interesting frame. I built this with my dad when he came up, and so in the winter, you can drop that down, these little posts move, and all that is just a nail with a piece of wood. It's double layer UV stabilized polycarbonate fabric, and then there's some like runs that I put along, because we get snow here, and so I didn't want to have just a sheet of plastic at a relatively mild angle. It's not particularly steep. In the future I probably should have made it steeper, but this is basically one board that I just cut diagonally, so it's easily, they're even on both sides. But unless you have a huge board, it's not going to get very tall. But really sturdy, probably overbuilt. But yeah, it's kind of it's a cool first frame on cold frame that I've ever tried. So next year I'll have, if there's no honeyberry seedlings, I'll be able to plant, say, carrots or lettuces really early in the season, and hopefully give myself a few weeks in the spring and a few weeks in the fall of just passively heated, or like using the heat of the sun, just trapping it in with polycarbonate. So that's pretty exciting. The jostaberry is doing fine. Still has not put on any fruits, so I don't know. Of the currants, oh, that was another thing. So after honeyberries, strawberries, and then a huge currant crop. Red currants, a couple kinds of black currants, all had a ton of fruit, so which is really exciting. And I really like sour as a flavor, so I think currants are delicious. The jostaberry is a currant gooseberry hybrid, and so far I've been relatively unimpressed by this one, because it's been around, it's a pretty big plant, and it has not produced any fruit. But, you know, it's kind of interesting. And this apple tree that oh yeah, look at that. Oh. In the spring, or in the morning time, Japanese beetles just fall. You can see all their poop. But this tree's recovering well. I accidentally took the stem out. I girdled it with a string that I was trellising it with last year. So I cut it, and now this is the new leader. A little wonky, but it'll be fine. The rhubarb came in really well. The apricot tree that I planted last year is doing decently well. It leafed out well, but hasn't. The new growth isn't crazy. I think in the future it'll grow a lot more. I put in a goji berry here. It's kind of half dead. So this is a little sad little goji berry, but it didn't come particularly healthy. Lovage is coming in, so in the future this will be a bigger plant. It's kind of like perennial celery to some extent. There's a currant and a bergamot, some daikon radishes, some walking onions. But one thing to see, I also have new hardy kiwis, which haven't done too much this year. But the female hardy kiwi is right here. So you can see it's growing decently well. So this is a new stem here. I don't know how much it's going to grow this year, but next year I expect it'll start to climb up this trellis and give me a permanent vine on this half, where then I can fill in with tomatoes on this half. So you can see the tomatoes are growing great here. There's some cherry tomatoes that I saved from last year, and then I think these are black crim or black seaman, whichever is the bigger beefsteak variety of those. I saved from last year here. And then I put some Kiss Me Under the Garden Gates in the middle to kind of stabilize the trellis, you know, give it a new like living trellis in the middle of all the hazelnut woods. And hazelnut just makes amazing trellis wood. So I would encourage everyone to seek out biological trellises if possible. A lot of people make really beautiful cattle panel trellises, which is great and will last quite a while. I think the disadvantage is that there's a lot of embodied energy in making a cattle panel, versus this is at least carbon neutral, probably vaguely carbon negative, because some portion of it will go into the soil when it decomposes. I mean, the twine has some amount of carbon, but it's a lot less than steel, so I think it's pretty nice. And yeah, this whole area I kind of call the meadow. There's zucchini and basil and there's peppers in there actually, and some squashes and potatoes over there. There's kales, there was peas, there's cucumbers, there's more tomatoes. There's lamb quarters. Oh, I'm trying to pull it up. So in this time of year, it's not very beautiful or appetizing, but in the springtime, lamb's quarters is a really delicious green. So I always let some of these go to seed so that I can literally shake them over my beds and select the weeds I like. So you're gonna get weeds no matter what. You might as well try to encourage the weeds you like to eat and discourage the ones you don't like. So I think lamb's quarters is a good one to have. Good for chickens too. So we've covered a lot of the annuals. The tomatoes are doing really well, probably the star of the season. The lettuces all grew well, the spinach grew well. The perennials are doing well, great berry crop this year. Some failure on the plum, or feedback, call it what you will. A lot of the trees really aren't producing yet, but in the coming years I expect they will be. The peach tree is amazing, and I'm really excited to see it finish the season. Oh, let's look at the grapes. So, until this year, I mean, I've always had pretty good grapes set, but generally we have a pretty wet season. And I don't know if you can tell because there's still dew on the plants this morning, but in general it's been really dry this season. It hasn't really rained at all. And granted, I haven't watered the garden, which, it's kind of impressive. But if you look, there's amazing grape set. And this is just one set from around the garden. Over there, same story. And so far, there's very little black rot. There's a very small amount for some of them. But I'm actually having a hard time finding it, which is kind of amazing. Because in years past, you would just see it along, oh, you can see it's kind of a spider web here too. I mean, this might be a little, yeah, so I mean, there's a little speck of it here, but in the past, it's just covered all of the grapes, and basically all of them dropped before they were ready. So that still might happen. Like, we had a small rain yesterday. But I'm of the opinion that you should grow crops to grow well. So even if none of my grapes ever make a big crop, someday I might try a sulfur spray, which is just elemental sulfur sprayed on it to make an acidic environment that the fungus won't thrive in. That wouldn't hurt any sort of bees, which would be good. That said, it's a lot of work, and so if you have to baby your crops like that, I think a better strategy might be just to focus on crops that you don't have to baby, like this Menage Meru black currant. Makes a ton of fruit every year, incredibly vigorous, incredibly easy to propagate, no pesticides, minimal weeds, maybe a little morning glory, but in general, just a really easy crop to grow. So, and you can make a wine with it, or a mead with it, or a jelly with it. So I don't know, the grapes are nice. They make a good trail, like a wall from the outside. Keep it a little more private inside. But it's interesting to see that without much rain, they seem to be doing okay. But we'll see how that goes. Well, let's see if it continues to be successful this year or if they start to rot again. I think that's a lot of what I wanted to share today. I guess raspberries have been the most recent berry. And then what we're looking forward to right now are the aronia berries. They're going to ripen soon. In the future, we'll have sea berries. There's no berries on them this year. But I think that's largely what I wanted to share. And so, in the spirit of not adding pesticides in the garden, I'll have some more B-roll of some of the best insects I've seen in the garden this year, because it's an organic, ecologically minded garden. So, hope you enjoyed the insects, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.